John Katie's new book, ROTC Kills, or as the title poem pronunciation guide informs us, ROTC Kills, was published by HarperCollins in September. His previous book, 95th Street, received the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets. He's also received the Frank O'Hara, Kingsley Tufts Awards, and is a distinguished professor of philosophy emeritus at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So pardon my brief foray into biography, but it informs my reaction to John Katie's new book, and perhaps something about Katie more generally. I first came into contact with John Katie's poems when I was a student, and perhaps a poet, at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Now, with the size of the city, Milwaukee has a vibrant poetry scene. Vibrant enough for one to be deeply immersed in local poetry and still not know every poet in the community, or at least it felt that way at the time. For me, Katie was one of those poets. I read his work, graceful, often blank verse meditations, and saw him read, but I always viewed both him and his work as a universe unto itself within the community. So I was a bit surprised when I picked up a copy of his newest book, ROTC Kills, with its aggressive title and cover illustration, featuring what appears to be, and what the poem confirms it as, a painting of 3 bayonets rendered in an expressionistic style, red bayonets on a bright yellow background. And if I didn't know this was a book of Katie's poems, I would assume it was a book of poems by a fiery young poet deriding our current military entanglements in Iraq and Afghanistan. That reaction, it turns out, is prescient in some ways. Although my prior description of the assumed author may not fit the memory that I have of Katie as a person, the poems in the book examine a theory of memory and time where Katie, or at least the speaker in his poems, and his past selves exist now as a function of memory. Therefore, our present entanglements and past military actions referenced in the poster in the poem both are a feature of the present moment for the speaker in the poems. Although plenty of poetry deals with the tension between youth and experience, there's a tendency perhaps to treat these qualities as a binary, where one gives way to another. The poems in ROTC Kills, on the other hand, deal not only with the way in which the past informs a person or poem's present tense, the ways in which, through memory, our own private universe, the past is the present, or perhaps more accurately, to the extent that we experience the past through memory, then the past is present. It's a place, to quote one of the poems, where anything that happened once can happen again. There's more to the line, but I don't want to ruin it. The explicit shifts in perspective lend the poems a cascading, fracturing, though maybe smoothly so, effect, in which the poems reference the speaker's past and the speaker's present, which by extension leads the reader to consider the writer's present and the reader's present. This produces the uncanny effect of double and triple distancing, a telescoping effect that pushes you away perhaps, but maybe paradoxically draws you closer. Like watching a movie you enjoy, tinged with a kind of melancholy, because you are never able to forget that the whole thing is a construction. That though the film constructs a world that you are deeply invested in, everyone is acting, speaking lines, while preoccupied with other thoughts, with their own lives, in that past present, and an entirely different place, here in our present. Well, melancholy, revealed in such lines as, I love the past tense, but you can't live there. I love the stories you believe add up to you, though they never do. The vision in ROTC Kills is comforting in a sense, or at least is attempting to reach comfort in the fact that memory is a present thing, even if contingent on present circumstances and faculties. And though temporary and isolated, the universe of memory is our own. Please welcome John Katie to the Poets Project.
There are 4 movies that I saw between the ages of 10 and 14 that became parts of my life, for what that's worth. The Man Who Knew Too Much, which I saw when I was 10 at the Mission Theater on 5th Avenue, half a block north of the Orpheum. Doris Day and Jimmy Stewart leave their stylish London friends completely in the lurch in their elegant hotel room and set out in search of Ambrose Chapel, which turns out not to be a person, but rather a church where their kidnapped son is being held. There's a concert and a clash of cymbals and a shot. A party at an embassy where she sings Que Sera, while he sneaks up the stairs to find their son. The suspense becomes unbearable, but it all ends well, and with their death-defying labors done, the three of them return at last to their hotel, where their friends have fallen fast asleep. Vertigo, which I'll come back to in a minute, came to the Orpheum in 1958, followed a year later by North by Northwest, which is completely captivating, probably the best piece of entertainment ever filmed. Cary Grant is on the lam, wrongly suspected of an assassination in a crowded lobby at the United Nations. He sneaks aboard a train bound for Chicago, and in the dining car falls in with Eva Marie Saint. They seem to hit it off, engaging in some quaint old-fashioned bantering and flirtation before repairing to her sleeping car, where, alas, she makes him sleep alone. He has a close call with a crop duster in a tall cornfield in downstate Illinois, leaving him covered with dust, yet still impeccable. And the movie culminates in a scene atop Mount Rushmore, where after clambering around a presidential nostril or two, he saves her life and pulls her up into their nuptial bed, an upper berth back on a train. Although the famous phallic finish, as the train goes roaring through a tunnel, went over my head. I saw Psycho at the California Theater on 4th in 1960. It starts out in a seedy hotel room in Phoenix, so much grimmer than the hotel room in The Man Who Knew Too Much, which foreshadows the seedy Bates Motel. Janet Leigh is also on the lam. Flight seems to be a recurring theme, and holds up there, and then decides to turn around. Before she can, she's gruesomely dispatched, we later learn, by Anthony Perkins in the notorious shower scene, which tore me out of my seat. He's devoted to his mother, who shows up in another scene that made me jump, as Martin Balsam, a detective fresh from talking to Lee's lover, John Gavin, heads up the stairs to the mother's bedroom, and she lunges out at him with her brutal knife. She appears again at the movie's climax, when Lee's sister, Vera Miles, finds her in the fruit cellar, and she slowly turns to her, the way a malignant figure in a dream with an averted face starts to turn to you, and then you scream. All of these movies were tremendously entertaining, sure, and a lot of fun, but Vertigo was something else again. A pure fever dream, a fantasy fulfilled and then at once destroyed. I saw it again last weekend at the Rosebud Cinema in Wauwatosa, and it still retains its power to disturb. It's Jimmy Stewart once again, a wealthy, acrophobic retired policeman hired by a college friend, Tom Helmore, to investigate his wife, supposedly possessed by the ghost of her great-grandmother, Carlotta Valdez, who killed herself at 26, his wife's own age. Kim Novak impersonates the wife as part of a plot to murder her. Stewart falls in love with her, of course, but driven forward by Carlotta's furious rage to end her life, Novak leaps from the bell tower of Mission San Juan Bautista, though it's the real wife who falls. Stewart is destroyed, and then his life starts to begin again. He meets a shop girl, Judy, it's Novak again, and tries to resurrect the past, remaking her in the image of his dead love, Madeline, until, his fantasy complete, she stands before him in a gauzy haze. And then Carlotta's necklace makes him see the truth. In a daze, he drives her to the mission where the suicide occurred, and struggling against his vertigo, he drags her up into the tower, where, hysterical, she admits to everything. Suddenly a nun emerges from the shadows muttering, "I heard voices." Novak screams and plunges to her death. Stewart stands there stunned and silent, looking down in disbelief at what he's done. This is a poem, it was written for a chapbook celebrating Harold Bloom's 80th birthday, and it's dedicated to him. It's called The Whole Creation. I still believe in it, though I don't know who else does. I first experienced it in the building I have an office in now, and called it poetry. But the word was just a placeholder for something undefined, though that's too simple a way to put it. You aspire to what you admire, whether you understand it or not. And now that I've retired into it, I want to remain here in my home away from home, roaming without sadness through the whole creation, through the long song of myself. Some days I wake up in a room suffused with sunlight, like a yellow jelly bean, as Jimmy Schuyler put it in his great poem, Hymn to Life. But it's not that kind of day. There was a blizzard overnight, and everything shut down, including my seminar. And so instead of ruminating on that poem, I'm fooling around with this one and looking out the window at the snow. What is poetry anyway? It falls like snow and settles where it falls and melts. I thought I was going to wake up in another world, and so I have, but it's the one where I began. The sunlight just came back, as what begins in gladness and uncertainty matures into a kind of baffled happiness, unfinished and complete. I have the sense of something constantly receding, the way the future does, then suddenly returning, like the past. It's all so confusing, and yet it doesn't bother me. Everything evaporates, but some of it eventually comes back in the uncertain form it assumed in the first place. A remnant still intact, and seemingly as distant from me as the books in the library I keep remembering and looking up, and as close as them too. But I loved it, whatever it was. I'll read the title poem, Rotzi Kills, which isn't actually about ROTC at all. It's really centered on some posters from the 1969 strike at Harvard, one of which is the cover for the book. Rotzi Kills. I'm retired. I'm sitting in a house I made in my imagination years ago that now is real. On the walls are posters from the Harvard strike in 1969 I saved for their designs and then forgot about, and now they're here. Stop Harvard expansion, strike for the 8 demands, and then best of all, in tiny red letters with 3 red bayonets, ROTC kills, pronounced Rotzi kills. From here inside, time seems unreal. I'm back in graduate school, but then the mind ascends and time becomes objective. I'm myself again, at home again, and 64. The particulars of a life, the pattern of a life, these are the poles the mind, in the guise of a poem, floats back and forth between. The commiseration, the deflating sigh. The trees are tossing in the wind. The leaves unfurl their silvery undersides. The soft clouds drift across the sky. Time may be an abstraction, but it makes the days go by. The days I never thought I'd see, when the music of the 60s lost its way, became too faint to hear, the voices fell away, and then it all came down to me. What were those 8 demands? I can't recall to save my life. I lived there, I breathed that air, and sometimes some of it drifts back to me. You should join PL, Paul said as we were sitting in the lounge. Picketing the GE plant in Lynn didn't much appeal to me, so I just said it seemed too hard to square with being married and finishing my degree. Yes, that's what's so great about it, he replied as I rolled my eyes. Or Johnny Supak's plan to hold the chairman, Rogers Albritton, hostage in his office. The kids are stealing underwear from Filene's basement, asking for the Red Army. Where's the Red Army, they're asking. It felt so all-important at the time in a surreal way. The endless back and forths, the forums, teach-ins, meetings and analyses, strategic planning sessions. But that would be capitulationism. And look at what it came to. I didn't even vote in 1968. Chicago was too fresh. But on election night, I found myself nostalgic for the hump. Only by then it was too late. It's nice to think it might have made a difference, but that's just wishful thinking. Money finds a way, and if it wasn't Nixon, too much has gone to be restored, and as for money equals speech, it's a joke. The silence in what people used to call the streets is deafening. All talk is on the radio, as money quietly wraps its hands around the country's throat. I wonder what Larry, my general contractor, Jeff, my carpenter, Jerry, who occasionally did the plumbing, made of all the posters. They couldn't be more friendly, but Wisconsin's a peculiar state. La Follett's versus Tail Gunner Joe, the sewer socialist mayors of Milwaukee, and the park where Hitler lovers rally. I'm not sure I could explain them in a way they'd understand. I'd see there were these demands. But then there's Mitch, the landscape guy, whose countercultural compulsion to explain is straight from Paul and Johnny. It's beautiful out here. I feel alive and out of it. From the aisles of the Piggly Wiggly, the world of variety, to the steps of the unique cafe, the shelves of Gasser hardware. Driving through the vast obscurity beyond the city, it suddenly seems so clear, though the clarity is probably deceptive, as clarity often is. Beyond the signs for prefab homes, I bought one. Pro-life billboards with a baby floating in what looks like amniotic fluid. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Madmen on the radio denouncing Baptists and Freemasons. By the streams, the rivers, the steep unglaciated hills. You couldn't climb them. Would you want to? But it's comforting to know they're there. We live in different dream worlds, wandering through a wilderness of words, while the real story writes itself in silence. It's 40 years ago, it's yesterday, and when I try to think of what those posters represent, I realize they're footnotes, surface irritants that left the underlying language undisturbed. Their meaning is the interval between the times of then and now, the times of looking forward and of drifting back. They flash upon that inward eye, and then they're gone. I'm sitting in a room, I'm looking at the trees, unsure if this is something other than another version of The Big Chill, a movie I despise. I hope it is. I saw Paul not too long ago. He's mellowed. Everyone is mellowed. Mellow is a word for disappointed. The 60s had their charms, but patience and contentment weren't among them. It was a brief, imaginary time, swept along by anthems and guitar heroes. When tomorrow had arrived, the air was filled with specious possibilities. All the demands were just. The kids kept calling for the Red Army, and Rotzi killed. Seems to be something irritating my eye. This This poem, how do we do it? Oh. I'll read two more poems, one of them sort of long, but this is a poem, or is it? The title is the street number of Dara Park's house in Bridgehampton. 11:35. No one has to write any special way. You make it up as you go along. I started writing this way. No thoughts at first, then a lot of words in the guise of thoughts, then real thoughts, a long time ago. You can write or think about death directly, or you can write about it by indirection and delay. The way the diary of a day reflects the silence waiting darkly at the end, like the silence lingering after graduation, when the students have all gone away and the ghost campus descends. I don't know what to say about Dara, a painter who gradually convinced himself that he saw what he didn't actually see, until finally he couldn't see at all. I loved him in a way, though the in a way tells all. There was something not quite there, and now there's nothing there at all. I drove by his house last Saturday when I was visiting Bob. Vines and weeds were everywhere. Bushes encroached upon the porch. There was a dull, uneasy feeling something bad had happened there that left an empty house with empty windows I had to stretch to see through, staring into rooms as empty as a skull from which the mind is gone. I couldn't look in the studio. I took pictures of the for sale sign and then drove home, or what felt like home. The Saturday afternoon was bland and beautiful, with no sense of an ending, or the thought that gradually insinuates itself in the back of the mind in a studio, alone. And I'll end with a long poem called Watchful Waiting. It has an epigraph from an older poem of mine that reads, "Let's see what happens." Watchful Waiting. I'm waiting at the bar at Jean's, a place on West 11th Street, just down the street from the Larchmont Hotel, where I usually stay when I'm in New York. I come to New York a lot since I retired. From what, someone asked. Jean's is down some stairs, and sitting at the bar, you can watch people walking by through a window above your head, the way I'd imagined New York when I was a kid, or imagined Don Powell's New York. I sometimes think of life as a vicarious attempt to make sense of yourself, balancing what you did and didn't do so that they'll come out even at the end. And then I think that's probably a waste of time. It's not a book at all. There's too much time, and then it's gone. That sense of something waiting to unfold is missing, leaving only the waiting. And when something does occur, it's always late, too late and incomplete, like a small residue of feeling. We care too much about feelings. Feelings for what? Feelings can be stupid, maybe not in themselves, but in the way they magnify and reduce, leaving you exhilarated and confused. I guess I'll call Diane in a while to see what I have to say. I could tell her about the things I saw today, the anti-kitty show at the Japan Society, Shio Kasaka's white pots with small blue dots, the drawings at the Morgan, Italy and the Shake Shack, these people in the window walking by on their way home, or God knows where. That's the thing about time. It can take you anywhere, and yet it takes you home. It leaves you the same person in a different place, still always metaphysically alone, but with friends that you can phone and tell your travels to. I can't tell you what it is, but I can feel it flow and flow away until a memory breaks its spell and I'm in school again, or on a bus to college, or walking down Fifth Avenue in a daze. The memory doesn't matter. What matters is the interval it restores to life, the feeling of abstracted time made tangible, of duration without any destination, of a sense of a life. I keep reading my story over and over again, my one story. Readers of this column are probably familiar with its details, and I won't go over them again. They're as changeless as the pages of those novels I keep rereading on the planes to New York, washed in a noir California light, the scent of canyons after rain, the house on a canyon I won't see again. Does it make any difference? I try to tell you these things, not out of an urge to communicate. You have your stories too, but for their own sake, and my sake too, and to make the days go by, as though the point of taking stock were just to pass the time until there isn't any more, and the art of losing were its own reward. Is that really the best one can do? To stay at home forever, living, as Wittgenstein once put it, entirely in the present, burnishing the words until they're like a second nature, better than the first one, as though living in the moment weren't to simply let life happen, but to get it right? Why is everything as though, that great hope of a subjunctive life? I ought to decide what I'm going to eat tonight. In Hebdomeros, Giorgio de Chirico's novel in the form of an extended thought, there's a passage about those men who eat alone in restaurants, inhabiting the infinite tenderness, the ineffable melancholy of a moment so gentle and so poignant that one doesn't understand, while the personnel of the premises, the manager and cashier, the furniture, the tablecloths, the wine jugs, down to the salt cellars, and the smallest objects don't dissolve in an endless flood of tears. I think there's so much freedom in that thought. You stroll out into the night as into a wilderness of traffic lights and neon signs. I love feeling lost in the village. Crossing 7th Avenue below West 10th, I get confused, and I love feeling confused, like a lamb in the whiff and poof song. Following the confusion wherever it may lead, and, as I said a page ago, exhilarated too. Later I can find my way back home, wherever that may be, but now I'm wandering through a maze whose every prospect pleases, lingering on the curbs and corners as I make my way to nowhere in particular, celebrating the end of the day with a drink and dinner and a slow walk back to my hotel, pausing to look at the menu of a new restaurant at the end of Greenwich Avenue, across from Mixie Plizzic's, in the space where Café de Bruxelles used to be. Watchful waiting is a way of handling prostate cancer. It's such a gradual disease that rather than immediately rush in with scalpels or radioactive seeds, you take a wait-and-see approach, ready for the worst if it should come to that, but meanwhile letting nature take its course. The worst is always on your mind, of course, but at least it's not a foregone conclusion, as it is with so many other cancers. Browsing a famous blog last week, a blog where poets seem to go to die, I saw that Paul Violi had died. I'd always liked him, though I hadn't known him well. In January, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 10 weeks later, he was dead. It made me think of David Sachs, a philosopher and boyhood friend of my advisor, Rogers Allbritton, emphysema. He'd had his heart set on retiring to Scandinavia, but as retirement approached, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer too, and died. It concentrates the mind, as Samuel Johnson said of hanging, but what it concentrates mine on isn't the past I usually brood about, but the idea of the future. Not the political future, which I've given up on, but the personal future, with its fragile possibilities and plans. Starting from the past, you move along a settled arc of life that leads from then to now. But since the future isn't fixed, The road that leads you on from there is open-ended, like starting out in the evening without any end in view. The journey, not the distant destination, the scenes along the way, not the long look back. All great advice, I guess, if great advice is what you want, instead of simply waiting for a shoe to drop. Hello, Diane. I don't even know where I'm calling from anymore because the scenery keeps changing. I'm wandering around New York, and then I'm back in San Diego on a canyon, or I'm sitting on the deck at the Bean House, or at the Wright House in Two Rivers, looking at the view across the river as the fog rolls in and the light keeps changing, and the only constant is unchanging change. Unchanging change. That phrase is from The Crystal Lithium, a poem of Jimmy Schuyler's I adore. His great long poems remain in place as they move forward, marking their time until there isn't any more. I know that I'm repeating myself, yet it's precisely what I want to do. There's a kind of naturalness and grace that comes with repetition, with advancing by accretion through a space of rediscovered possibilities into a new world, which is the old world once removed, where I can almost imagine your face, and my face too, you to whom I write without writing, as though in talking to myself I also talk to you. We both know life is an adventure. Death is an adventure too, like an experiment to be concluded in the laboratory of the future, one whose outcome is completely certain, yet impossible to observe. The suspense is in the details, as it morphs from an abstraction into something personal and real, drifting from the dark shadows at the back of the mind into the bland light of an ordinary day. And just as the fear of death and the unknown becomes diminished by coming out into the open, so life accommodates its end by starting over, by leaving home to find another place to live. Where was I, and where am I now? I know, of course, exactly where I am, at the desk in my study in Milwaukee. But that's beside the point. It's where you are in your imagination that's important. For the life of simply staying where you are is a shadow's life that leaves you by yourself, alone and scared. Why can't we just move on? The light up ahead is soft and seems to beckon us, glowing with the promise of beginning once again, as if there were still time. Do you remember the death march along Via Veneto and the big happy bed in Berlin? I don't think of them as memories, but as opportunities to take advantage of or miss. Why don't we both revisit them, not to try to bring about the past, which was Gatsby's fallacy, but as part of what the future holds in store, where there might even be room for that dog, although I can't imagine where. Even Jeans, where all of this began, keeps pleading with us to appear once more in the windows over the bar and amble down the stairs. There's so much left to do and redo before it's time for me to show up on that blog. The question is if we should make it new, or try to get it right, or put the question to one side and stroll once more into the night, or onto Crazy Jet and fly to Paris from Berlin, and check into that terrible hotel, La Louisiane, the one you nicknamed Hotel Claustrophobia, and make our way along the Rue de Seine to the Metro to La Défense, then back to the hotel and to a night of quiet bickering over dinner at a lard. We could go there again and stay in a better hotel, or just be less fastidious this time around, or we could visit someplace new. I've always wanted to go to Mexico, though perhaps this isn't a propitious time. Anyway, at least it sounds like a kind of plan, however vague. Shit, we could go to Vegas. Come on, Diane.
John Godfrey is the author of over 10 books of poetry, most notably Dabbled Poems 1966 to 1980, an orange volume that's back there that sat in my dorm room at University of Iowa in 1983. I remember putting it on the grass of the quad and watching that orange against the green, and it became this very important book to me, and still I treasure it. He also is the author of Where the Weather Suits My Clothes, D Press 1984, City of Corners, Wave Books 2008, and most recently, Tiny Gold Dress from Lunar Chandelier Press, 2012, and that is also, I think there's a small stack in the back, so you should check it out. There's something about reading John Godfrey's poetry that forces the mind to exist in a perpetual state of surprise. Each new line blends itself into the next, creating shifts of perception that are so regal and smooth that I find myself in a constant state of awe. Slippery glimpses of life mutate in a gentle cyclone of language, music, and meaning. Anticipation becomes futile as the poems roll forward, continually revealing themselves, line after line, full of lovely details, bulging with a pure dose of the most sophisticated music in the poetry business. Godfrey's dense, compacted lyricism crackles with elegant wit. His language varies from the high, erudite diction of an urban John Donne to the guttural swagger of a street-smart wise guy walking through New York. It is this tension that gives Godfrey's work its distinct and utterly compelling nerve. His poems are so much more than a mirror held up to modern life. They are, quite simply, a new way of experiencing the world, and even more specifically, the city we live in, New York City. And I have this fantasy of John and I just walking through the city and him just saying his poems to me as we move through. He narrates my walks so often. I would be in heaven if he would do that. What's your price? As a fellow poet, I find it almost impossible to read it without wanting to sit down at one point and write a poem of my own, which is the highest compliment I can give a fellow poet. It's an honor to introduce John Godfrey.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you. I'll think about the price. I mean, Tiny Gold Dress, and I'm going to begin with that poem. I can't listen in this room very well. And every time I say the word tinnitus to old colleagues, they say, "Oh, I got tinnitus." And if you have difficulty, let me know. I've practiced and I'm prepared to read in falsetto. I think that will work. Smokey Robinson's going to shoot me. And Nolan Strong isn't alive to do it. Tiny Gold Dress. Days so fleet, you'd have to have seen unruly ones. I do all the time. Someone I soon trust puts your hand in mine, just what I'm looking for. Start with the body and search me. Won't find me sleeping. I dig my 6 feet, and you stand there in your tiny gold dress. Can't believe my eyes. Your smile knows, your ever so slight lisp. Ahead of me in the opposite direction, big man alerts me. I shed little bits of chivalry. I caress like one bereaved. Forethought and hindsight in the flesh. Peanut shells under bed. Lamp nearby of fire and roses. Ribbons of smoke sketch momentarily an orchid. Dispelling face. Mirror boy, mirror girl. Never can you tell in the mirror world contradiction from ambiguity. Alliteration of tires at noon. Inconsistencies of the equal and the functions they suggest. Axis pass through one dispelling face, the prices she pays in life. I watch through the veil. When she's ready, you know there's no replacement. She signs with a snake 3 times of her neck, the communal letter of odium. Reverie comes hard. Sometime grandma looks good. Voluptude that never resolves seems always snookered 3 feet from the well. Back of the hand large with veins, eyelid gleams lavender out of shadow. Sundry things she wears at her waist, hip things to do in captivity. Room to sleep, to breathe and measure all else that lives, not breathe and risk the memory you inherit. There is a way, everybody say. The shadow of a branch in autumn gust flicks across her face and imprints it on the air of my suspirations. Once the detective who can find your guitar, now I weave up Avenue Way, abstracted in the vision of her bushy eyebrows. Her eyes offer room to sleep. Only so tall, it is fall, hand deep in coals left by careless sparks. Night lengthens to blow on them with dreams. I invent her radiance. Exaggeration is slight. Identify her straight stride, sun at her back, a world away. By the way, for a very long time, for like 17 years, almost all of my waking hours were spent in Brooklyn. For 9 years, anywhere between Linden Boulevard and Myrtle Avenue, and from City Line to the Farragut houses. And a lot of the things that become part of my subliminal resources have to do with events that I saw over there. Brooklyn is a lot more like what I always thought New York was when I was a kid now than New York has been for many years. Or the city. When you're in Brooklyn, people say, where do you live? You say, I live in the city. I say, oh, yeah. Where? They say, I live in the East Village. Oh, I love the East Village. Hey, it's true. They get off the L train, they're all, oh, I love it. Despite murder, she deserves better by someone. Desire for the worst to happen. Feel like she really joined communal genius of misery. Resist entering because of the bricks. In this heat, you've got a point. Outdoor weather suits your clothes. Street lights, gold against turquoise horizon after a mean sun disappears. Bunch of girls moseys off in search of the offensive. In the day, they call me lucky. Problems were beginning even as countless others were not resolved despite murder. She left me uptown, and I came down with my pants over my head, walking backwards, assured of glory like her other million fools. Naked fingers. Premonitions rise as body does, back on dry land. With what to mingle distress? Sources of light unstable, remove petals of metallic pink with naked fingers. Out the window, ratty treetop blows free of leaves, dressed to ward off wind and welshers. Activity in hair, novel ways of cold in a village of mani-pedi. Do not trust the assessors. If particles obey words, the carpet bears flowers on rainy days. My eyes are dry, glance inappropriate. Can we somehow change position inseparably? Door with missteps with missing. I find no one else. Well, a monologue then. Questions about parting, firm grasp abrupted, scent attaches to a name, legs wrapped in sheets of water, hands that caress know the price of invasion, glove in the gutter starched by tires, grasps the necklace. Which windows are lit changes. Goodbye to the moon. Leave there forever. First cry. You know, some people bounce back and forth in the same book with this little thing. I say, read them in the order they're in the book. I'll give a lecture on how you organize a manuscript sometime else. I will a little bit, you know. The last thing. I may be bound to depths. There's only one heaven if you go there twice. Celestial street lamps, the last kegs hang from. I stretch to reach, nothing doing. Forbidden things leave their brand on my residence, body, if you will. Impels me to postulate a friction less than thigh against thigh. The last thing to do is to wrong. This sidewalk's part of the trail. Twilight connects some dots, successions of gravity echo my every last step. On the level. Please don't go. There are things you don't know. Make-believe love is street talk. Intimate the way I die. Point out highlights. Landscape of her body, treehouse in her hair. She dives and loses the suit you never believe she wears. She's on the level. If only on weekends, presentiment and presentation. I conclude with your leg, squint of amusement in your small eyes. You assert an intention to know. Blacker than brown finger cast shadows of hanged man. In her dream, I sleep, or is it die? Here, right. Handprint on mirror. Dust where only dust leaves behind. Cigarette odor stain. Blouse shines amid dimness. Finger impresses crumbs. Response all miscued. Turns on the lamp. They say harmony resigns. Now for a sip. The glass secures light and lets it loose in nearby corners. Her lips begin the summary. Ambient sound augments. Cigarette falls faster than ash. Feet shuffle under chairs. You hear right. The last door down the last hall. The one you want. The one. When the moon begins its fall, you'll be the one. A little bit of clothing, lipstick stain, come apart this way. Daunt or undaunt, you straighten your seams. It's all trip to you. And you arrive too soon. The only way round your past is away. Face the timetable. A little past noon. Tell them don't wait. Inside the moon. Spell your name uniquely. To see your clothes is to see your body, all burdened and unrighteous. Your adversary is smithereens, a river called by music, something to tap into when you feel hokey hot. The look of a satin doll, sweet forget about it. I see the bounded spell of her face, it comes out at night, violet in the sheen. I never want the earth to be inside the moon. She locks up her hair, water on both sides, a bridge too close, turns the light up on that corner to fill the ville with scent. No more little bitty baby. Corner of Garvey and Amazon, a millionaire buys less. The science it takes, infinite particles, the beatings of the heart. As I might. Don't tell the whole story. You like a serious ellipse. Laugh when you measure it. Don't dig on gibberish. Farther and farther afield, punch out a niche to foot the bill. At the root of it all, a woman you dreamed real. Before you sit down, she brushes off the step. Comes along a judge. Wonder where is that gambling man gone to? Everybody knows where I am. The cave wraps around, at ease with the stranger's shadow. Tell it as I might, collection of bits and pieces, ending on the move in replications of a present. Who's to say more? Now, these are from poems I've written since the first day of 2011. I make manuscripts based on the calendar. So, okay, last day of 2010. Which means that by the end of one phase, you start working your way into the next one. So you get a little taste of the next phase, and then you're sort of got a leg up. And then that all changes. Everything changes. How am I doing? I'm not doing that. Doubles. The need get mounted. Pass cross at first evasive, then touch. Look down if you still pray. It is music to death's ears. The lot taken away, defined by the victor. When it satisfies, it is true. There is help above, but not while I'm submerged. The coffee house tips left when I collapse to the right. The reinvention of something spit between teeth when that's forbidden. I find you 3 times in the same morning. Those are doubles, sweetie. Your hand trembles slightly, afraid of bridges, afraid of silk. Breeze undoes itself around your ankles. And when the light is beat down to nothingness, you really do use black paint to describe it. If you press this button, a horn sounds. If you press that one, you don't know what. It gladdens me to tell you this. Some crazy kind. The dustiest rose allows the sun. Tableau waits poised and blue. Mixed into the din, a verdict drives the abstentious home. You have to walk towards high roofs to see a slip of a girl going on 18. You step into horizontal light, and it is warm. Don't make it yours. The personal car gets orphaned just when care fouls off public infatuation. The ceiling is so defaced that when it lowers, the usual targets burst into flames. Now will you listen and huddle in your filmy clothes? One after the other, they look to the right and to the left, but not in your direction. You feel asleep on your both feet. You dream you are outside the palace in some crazy kind of handcuffs. We all have our slips, precipitous slips. But then we rescue the hairlit kid from a lifetime of prosperity and abandon her to sightliness and leaden power. Left to go. Itch meets royalty, yen lurks in feeling. End of my day, not yours. No tailored robot, no answers. Glasses clink through windows without glass, and how clean the fenders. Hard to call my knee a knee when I see that one. Tube under the river, passengers invisible, but once you become one, not an everyday distraction, she vanishes up the stairs, but I finish her story. Contrary to evidence, sentiment sees vanity the equal of defense and alertness. When there is nowhere left to go, I am back among sunlit amblers. To look at me, you wouldn't know. I've guessed what train she's on now. Rhythm section, hot tonic. Music, I imagine my own. Instructions in patois. Drummer pays no mind. Bass pays no mind. Chords descend over my eyes. Gravitation in clouds. Hand drawn towards them. Eat with hands. Ghostly particles touch each side. Assignment of cause useless. The girl dances on. I know less than she. At least when I eat with hands and balconies blink on and off. The subject of the city is windows, smoked glass an unspeakable factor. Her appearance through double pane, a bodily odor suggests my inspiration. The maybe is inaudible. Glass blows out over roofs. More windows, please. The stairway to dreams is hungry. I do not sleep in a position I choose. Stars fade on my earlobes. In the heap of the moment, sound falls from an innocent sky. Violoncello and sarod linger and die away. The maquette, once transparent, armatures corrode. The solution to despair? A more seductive despair. Evidence. It takes a long time for me to collect evidence. The woman on the beach, for instance, is right now uptown. How can a street be haunted, a city refined, where it would never occur to you to retrace your steps? In my dream, your eyes, which never move from mine, give you a headache. You wrap your head with a shawl, and goony voices chant fond harmonies. You groom your feathers as an act of squeamishness. What if you spook at only unintelligible sounds? What if you dance by yourself? I'm ready, have been. The chill is not all in your mind. Cold falls like dust from holes in unseen stars. The bridge that looks like a rainbow to you is a wet crosswalk. Far behind us now, they discover how little we ate for how much I paid. Wrapping cloth. Carry it to shelter like an embryo in deft hand. Lilac chandeliers that combine to pollinate. Turbinates and taste buds swell to read the map. In a vacant lot, the ashes of indigo faces mark the spot where, buried, it petrifies. So you skirt selected lies if you don't know bullshit from bullets. I go up frequently by streetlight and by Bic to check the snares. And that fine spray, atmosphere is dry ice, the air is smoky fog. Presume to breathe this gas as it separates from what is distant from the earth. Volume below the waist displaces the corresponding spirit. I have been waiting, how else to watch closely. Pains taken with the wrapping cloth. Breasts beneath the knot. Fa, fa, fa. Like the crest in her hair, bully comes over her. Chewed up and out, she shuns tenderly. Spoken in an instant, a speech of the hounded. Shade of digital sign contributes to the pause. One arm gilded, one chromed. Groomed and accented face, unfinished eyes where rudimentary things last. Last one to touch the car, bag on backseat a mistake. Wherever she is, the center approaches the wall. Headlight blink at 3 p.m. Now she really moves. Count the accusations. Find out for sure this evening. If you don't know the signs, the empty moon is full. Mad early, loopy late. I could stop the hang of it, but I'm watching. She brushes by, singing fa, 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 not for want of words. The title. Volition escorts you mid-span. Right wipes off left. The title is yours, but instead you pass me the album of fires. Miscreant means well. Thunder turns into the air I breathe. An oil absent of light, knife on your palate. Forget replication. Maybe your skills better suit mistakes. They soften hearts, they divide enemies. They promise a context. Excuses happen all by themselves. Therefore, the title. On the way is where you stay. I should throw the word away. Without time, a note can really last. Alone with a touch, fingers forever arrested on a back, hollows of darkness along your arm, your most flattering light. Salty lips. All it proves is you are afraid. It enters through the armpit, curved and tightly curled to adorn the child, complex yet lacking the vocabulary. Tendency to see ribbons in hair, around toes, pressed into clay, pink and pewter, source of relief. You slip away off the spool introduced by the Antiguan of ultraviolet insides. I have lifted the smock at the foot of stairs. I have found a way to spare myself the slaps. Taste of rose oil in spoiled mango, curtain falls of same color. I hold that the bottommost must build muscles of inversion. The heavens must not win. Astral diversion appalls me. Season of salty lips. Pretend that's all I want to do from now on. stretched flat like the pampas, bounded by the horizon itself, a filmy light on the edge where new life is. Oasis you can't see. Bib stitched with pearl bullets disappears into the oasis you can't see from here. Inexplicable and better that way. Nuisance hides the mockery linked to failure. A woman paces, flowers pendant in hand, matches strides with longing, a footfall of unfamiliar purpose. The execution of a vision, flame kitchen stir-fries the fog. The crowns of palms are alive with them. I position the ladder I fashioned from cement. Already it is as hot as the air. It exaggerates shadows during the descent. I put my hand on the wet spot and run it through my hair. One by one, I reject the native cuisines. Plenitude is odd in so austere a nightclub. Lights around the mirror in tepid colors. On the back of my hand, the plan, to take it with me. The envelope, please. Thank you.